December 15th, 1944. The Hukong Valley, northern Burma. The jungle breathes in the pre-dawn darkness, a living, suffocating presence of tangled vines, ancient teak trees, and mud that clings to everything it touches. Somewhere in the canopy above, a hornbill calls out, its cry swallowed by the oppressive humidity that hangs like a wet blanket over the valley floor. Staff Sergeant James Robinson of the 93rd Infantry Division's 25th Regiment crouches behind a moss-covered log, his M1 Garand pressed against his shoulder, eyes scanning the wall of green before him. His hands are steady despite the sweat pooling in his palms. He's 23 years old, born in Alabama, trained at Fort Huachuca in Arizona. And right now, somewhere in the vegetation ahead, Japanese soldiers are waiting to prove that everything he is, everything his men are, amounts to nothing. You see, for months, Tokyo Rose has been whispering through radio static into the South Pacific night. Her voice, smooth and poisonous, carries a simple message to African-American soldiers fighting in the China-Burma-India theater. Why are you fighting? You're inferior. Your white commanders know it. Your enemy knows it. Go home. Your country doesn't want you. The propaganda leaflets flutter down from the sky like poisoned snow, cartoons depicting black soldiers as cowards, as subhuman, as evolutionary mistakes unfit for the warrior's path. The Japanese High Command, steeped in their own imperial ideology of racial superiority, believes this. The Nazi allies in Europe preach the same gospel. The Axis powers have built their entire philosophy on a hierarchy of human worth. And at the bottom of their imagined ladder, they've placed men like James Robinson. But here's what Tokyo Rose doesn't know, what the Japanese commanders in their bunkers haven't calculated. The 93rd Infantry Division and the 92nd Infantry Division aren't fighting to prove anything to their enemies. They're fighting despite their own country's doubts. These are men who trained in segregated camps, who couldn't eat in the same mess halls as their white counterparts, who were commanded by officers who sometimes believed the same propaganda the enemy was broadcasting. These are men who boarded ships, knowing that back home, in the country they're defending, they'd be refused service at lunch counters, barred from voting booths, and threatened with violence for daring to wear their uniforms with pride in the wrong neighborhoods. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ray, commander of the 93rd's 3rd Battalion, adjusts his field glasses as first light begins to filter through the jungle canopy. He's positioned his men along a ridge overlooking a key supply route the Japanese have been using to reinforce their positions deeper in the valley. Intelligence reports indicate a full company of Japanese infantry, maybe 200 men, are dug in along the ravine below, part of the larger 18th Division that's been holding this sector for 16 months. The Japanese have constructed a network of bunkers reinforced with logs and earth, nearly invisible beneath the jungle overgrowth. Machine gun nests cover the approaches. Snipers nest in the trees. It's a killing ground, designed by veterans who've been fighting since Manchuria. Ray knows the statistics. He knows that American military doctrine, influenced by flawed studies and institutional racism, has largely relegated black combat units to support roles, stevedore battalions, quartermaster companies, construction units. The 92nd and 93rd are among the few African-American divisions seeing frontline combat, and their performance is being watched, measured, and judged through a lens of prejudice that predates this war by centuries. Every action will be scrutinized. Every casualty will be used as evidence. Every victory will be qualified. But right now, in this moment, doctrine doesn't matter. Studies don't matter. What matters is that Sergeant Robinson has spotted movement. A flash of tan uniform against green foliage, 300 yards downslope. What matters is that the men of Company K are in position, their bars and mortars ready, their resolve hardened by something more powerful than propaganda. The knowledge that courage isn't bestowed by others. It's proven in moments exactly like this. Ray raises his hand. The jungle holds its breath, and then he drops it. The first mortar round shrieks overhead, a descending whistle that ends in a thunderous crack among the Japanese positions. Earth and splintered wood erupt skyward as Sergeant Robinson rises from behind his log and advances, his platoon moving with him in a coordinated line through the undergrowth. The M1 Garand barks in his hands. 8 rounds, the distinctive ping of the empty clip ejecting, reload, keep moving. To his left, Private First Class William Tucker from Detroit operates his Browning automatic rifle in controlled bursts, suppressing a machine gun nest that's suddenly come alive with muzzle flashes. The Japanese response is immediate and ferocious. Type 92 heavy machine guns open up from concealed positions, their 7.7mm rounds snapping through the air with that distinctive crack that means they're passing close, too close. A soldier named Davis goes down clutching his shoulder. Corporal Eugene Mitchell drags him behind a termite mound while continuing to fire his M1 carbine one-handed. This is the calculus of jungle warfare. Every foot of ground costs blood. Every bunker requires flanking. Every advance happens through a maze where the enemy has every advantage of preparation and position. But the men of the 93rd have trained for this. At Fort Huachuca, they ran through mock villages in the Arizona desert. They practiced fire and maneuver until it became muscle memory. They learned that in close terrain, aggression and coordination matter more than numbers. Now, squad leader Sergeant Thomas Harper coordinates with his bar team to fix the Japanese, machine gun in place, while he leads 4 riflemen in a wide arc through a stream bed choked with ferns. The water runs red-brown with mud and, soon, with blood, both American and Japanese. But Harper's team reaches the bunker's flank. 2 grenades, tossed with the accuracy born of endless repetition, and the machine gun falls silent. The battle for the Hukong Valley Ridge lasts 7 hours. By noon, Company K has pushed the Japanese back 300 yards through 2 defensive lines at a cost of 12 men wounded and 3 dead. But they've killed or wounded an estimated 45 Japanese soldiers, and they've captured a position that intelligence will later determine was a critical observation post for the entire sector. Lieutenant Colonel Ray, observing from a forward command post that's moved up twice during the engagement, radios the regimental commander. Objective secured. Casualties moderate. Morale excellent. What he doesn't say, what he doesn't need to say, is that his men have just accomplished something that military planners back in Washington had quietly doubted they could do. 300 miles to the south, the 92nd Infantry Division is writing its own chapter in blood and mud. On the Ledo Road, that impossible engineering marvel being carved through the mountains to connect India with China. Elements of the 92nd are running convoy escort and engaging in brutal small unit actions against Japanese forces determined to cut the supply line. Private Robert Madison, a former steelworker from Pittsburgh, is part of a squad that ambushes a Japanese patrol attempting to mine a bridge. The firefight is short, savage, and decisive. 7 enemy soldiers killed. No American casualties. Madison will later say the only thing he remembers clearly is the weight of his rifle and the smell of cordite mixing with the jungle's perpetual rot. But it's in the central Burma theater where the accumulated violence begins to tell its larger story. Through January and February of 1945, the 93rd and elements of the 92nd engage in continuous operations. Raids, ambushes, defensive actions, and full-scale assaults. They fight alongside Chinese divisions, British Commonwealth troops, and Kachin Rangers. They learn to move silently through terrain that seems designed to betray movement. They master the art of the night ambush, using darkness to negate the Japanese advantage in prepared positions. The Japanese 18th Division, blooded in China and confident in its superiority, begins to hemorrhage. After an engagement near Wanting, a captured Japanese officer's diary reveals a shift in tone. Gone are the references to inferior opponents. Instead, enemy Negro troops fought with unexpected tenacity. Our casualties severe. Request reinforcement. Another diary, recovered from a company commander killed in a night assault, contains a more blunt assessment. These soldiers fight like demons. Intelligence reports were wrong. By March, the cumulative toll is staggering. Conservative estimates place Japanese casualties inflicted by African American units at over 8,000 dead and wounded, with numbers climbing daily. The 93rd alone accounts for a documented 3,400 enemy casualties in a 3-month period. The 92nd, operating in the more mountainous terrain along the Ledo Road corridor, adds thousands more. American losses are significant. Combat in Burma doesn't spare anyone. But the kill ratio tells a story that no propaganda can counter. Staff Sergeant Robinson, now a platoon sergeant after casualties created vacancies in the command structure, leads a night patrol that destroys a Japanese supply dump and kills 12 enemy soldiers in the process. He returns to friendly lines at dawn with 2 wounded men and 0 dead. When his company commander asks how he maintained such discipline under fire, Robinson's answer is simple. "Sir, we don't have the luxury of panic. We never did." April 1945. The monsoon season approaches, but the fighting doesn't pause for weather. The Japanese defensive line in northern Burma is collapsing, not in dramatic breakthrough moments, but through the accumulated weight of 1,000 small victories. Near the village of Bamo, Lieutenant James Walker of the 93rd Division leads his platoon in an assault on a fortified temple complex that the Japanese have converted into a strong point. The ancient stone walls are pockmarked with bullet strikes from previous attacks. Machine gun ports have been carved into Buddha statues that have stood for centuries. It's a desecration of sacred space in service of a desperate defense. Walker's men advance under covering fire from mortars positioned in a rice paddy 500 yards back. Private First Class Samuel Jones, a farmer's son from Mississippi who once wasn't allowed to eat in the town diner, fires his rifle grenade into a gun port with precision that would impress any marksman. The explosion creates an opening. Sergeant Robinson, yes, he's still here, still fighting, now wearing a Purple Heart medal he received after taking shrapnel in February, leads the assault team through the breach. The fighting inside is room to room, sometimes hand to hand. It's brutal and intimate in the way only close combat can be. When the temple falls 2 hours later, 19 Japanese soldiers are dead, 3 captured, and Walker's platoon has suffered 4 wounded, but no fatalities. The pattern repeats across the theater. At Lashio, Company L of the 25th Regiment overruns a Japanese headquarters, capturing documents that reveal the extent of enemy casualties and the growing desperation in their tactical assessments. One intelligence summary, translated by Chinese-American linguists, contains a stark admission. Negro American units demonstrate combat effectiveness equal to or exceeding other Allied formations. Previous intelligence assessments require complete revision. The document is dated March 28, 1945, and it represents a complete reversal of the racial ideology that Tokyo Rose was broadcasting just months earlier. By April's end, as the Burma campaign moves into its final phase, the accounting becomes clear. The 93rd Infantry Division and the 92nd Infantry Division, operating across the multiple sectors of the China-Burma-India theater, have inflicted catastrophic losses on Japanese forces. The final tally, compiled from captured documents, battlefield counts, and enemy unit records seized after the war, exceeds 12,000 Japanese casualties. 12,000 soldiers killed, wounded, or missing, their lives spent against opponents that Axis ideology had declared inherently inferior. But numbers alone don't capture the magnitude of what happened in those jungles. Consider what these men accomplished against the weight of their own nation's doubt. They fought with equipment that sometimes arrived late because supply officers prioritized white units. They served under commanders, both good and bad, who carried the prejudices of their era. They knew that back home, newspapers would bury their achievements on back pages, while front-page stories celebrated the heroics of segregated white units. They understood that victory wouldn't guarantee equality, that they'd return to a country where the uniform they wore with honor could make them targets of violence in the wrong town. And yet they fought, not just competently, but brilliantly, not just bravely, but with a tactical sophistication that destroyed enemy formations and shattered racist propaganda. Sergeant Robinson, who survives the war and returns to Alabama, will later tell his grandchildren, "We didn't fight to prove we were equal. We fought because we already knew we were. The question was whether anyone else would notice." The Japanese Imperial Army noticed. In captured after-action reports and officer diaries, the evidence is overwhelming. Units that encountered African American formations learned, often fatally, that racial ideology is no match for disciplined soldiers with modern weapons and the will to use them. The myth of racial military hierarchy, so central to Axis thought, died in Burma's jungles along with 12,000 Japanese troops who believed it. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ray, awarded the Silver Star for his leadership during the campaign, writes in his official report, "The conduct of the men under my command exceeded all expectations except their own. They understood what was at stake, not just victory in Burma, but the larger question of their place in their nation's story. They answered that question definitively. The war ends. The soldiers come home, and America, slowly, reluctantly, begins the long process of confronting the contradiction of men who fought for freedom abroad while being denied it at home. The 93rd and 92nd Infantry Divisions are deactivated, their battle honors recorded, their casualties mourned. But the truth they established in Burma's mountains and jungles, the truth written in blood and sacrifice, becomes part of the foundation for the changes that follow. When President Truman desegregates the military in 1948, the combat record of these divisions weighs heavily in the decision. The propaganda leaflets promised cowardice. Tokyo Rose whispered lies about inferiority. The Japanese High Command planned their defenses around assumptions of racial weakness. And in response, men like James Robinson, William Tucker, Samuel Jones, and thousands of others marched into hell and emerged victorious. They didn't defeat just an enemy army. They defeated an idea, the poisonous notion that courage and capability are determined by the color of a man's skin. 12,000 Japanese casualties. Not statistics, but a repudiation. Not just numbers, but proof that valor has no race, that honor recognizes no color line, and that when propaganda meets reality on the battlefield, reality wins. Every single time. The jungles of Burma still stand, dense and unforgiving. The monsoons still come. But somewhere in that green darkness, carved into history itself, is the record of what happened when prejudice met courage and courage won.